Now, Stephen Jones, who's the Cowboys executive VP, was talking yesterday at the Combine and said about his quarterback, I've got all the faith in the world we can win this thing with Dak. Other than he hadn't won some key playoff games, he's everything you want in a quarterback. From the day he walked in the door, he's won a lot of games. We just got to get over the hump. We got to have a plan to ultimately extend Dak. Bart started laughing what made you laugh there?
I mean, isn't that the job? He's everything you wanted, but he's a nice guy. Like, you got to win some damn games. You got to exceed expectations. The mandate last year, Greeny, was to go deep in the playoffs. They won one game.
Right.
Like, what are we talking about? And now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because now he has a high cap number, and it would be great to try and extend him so that you can get some relief, so that you can bring some talent. They need some talent opposite CeeDee Lamb. Everybody knows the future of Ezekiel Elliott is probably over with. He'll probably come back on a cheaper contract if he'll take less money. But the job is to win a damn football game, and he hasn't showed up and played big. He led the league in interceptions, and he missed games. So he's everything we want. Everything I want is a playoff win. I don't care who you are as a person. Okay, you're a nice guy. Congratulations. But listen, that has to translate into wins and victories and team success. And he can be the nice guy in the world, but you got to win a damn game. That says it all about Dallas. What the hell is the expectations? What you want to thank you. Congratulations. Walter Payton Man of the Year award. That is a high regard, but they ain't winning me no games.
It's actually a very interesting point. And where they sit is an interesting place. Because, Jeff, if there's one thing that I think Dak proved to us last time he went through this contract thing, is he gets it. He held out for a shorter deal. He's not going to extend his contract because he knows that they have to do something with him. If they want to sign him, they're going to have to sign him for all, the huge quarterback money right now, because he knows that if he becomes a free agent, no matter how spectacular we may not think he is, teams will break the bank for a player like him. That's how I see it, Jeff. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And, you make a great point that I didn't even think about until you just said it. When it comes to, he held out for the shorter deal for that very reason, so he could get the other bite of the apple. Now, look, Stephen Jones' comments are the NFL's version of the great expression, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the show? Yeah, I mean, right. We very clearly need more out of Dak Prescott than the qualities that Stephen Jones listed. But, without being overly critical here, just because of Stephen Jones' comments, I do understand why the Cowboys are committed to Dak Prescott from the standpoint that there's two reasons. First of which is they believe in him. But the second of which is he's got a $60 million cap hit now. Now, they can restructure and save about $22 million against the cap to go out and spend. But if they can do an extension, they get a lot more money. And that ultimately is the goal of these teams, right? To put more pieces around Dak Prescott. So I understand what Stephen Jones is saying, maybe just the way he said it.
Tim, what do you think?
Look, I think extending Dak is a no-brainer. Look, Dak Prescott isn't even 30 years old yet. Look, he missed a bunch of games because of the thumb injury. It was an off year by his standards for sure, and his numbers are still comparable to someone like Derek Carr's numbers, who's roughly the same age, who everyone's like, hey, let's go out and get Derek Carr. So I actually don't understand it. I think we're being too critical of Dak. He's had a lot of production this year. Historically, he's been great at protecting the football. This year notwithstanding. Look, there's some changes offensively for them. Look, I get what Bart's saying. You don't pay a guy because he's a nice guy and he wins the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. But you do want that type of leader at the quarterback position for your football team, for your organization. They have that. So I look at Dak Prescott, and I think it's a no-brainer to extend him, help you get guys like Tony Pollard under contract, keep them in your building, find another wide receiver. Like, to me, the postseason lack of success isn't all at the lap of Dak Prescott.
He the one threw the interceptions, but Tim, if you give him the extension, then that's going to guarantee him more years. I think he wanted the shorter deal because he wanted to prove it deal. If you're talking extension, by the time this free agent market is over with these quarterbacks and Lamar gets paid, Jalen Hurts gets paid, Joe Burrow gets paid, Herbert gets paid, you may be committing $50+ million to Dak Prescott, who hasn't proved he was worth his last deal, because at the end of the day, he got the same amount of playoff wins as Trevor Lawrence.
That is true. Let me put a pin in that. We'll come back to this, because the reality is you're not choosing amongst you. It's not like they're saying, well, okay, we can either have Dak or Patrick Mahomes. Like, that's not the way the options works. Let's come back to that one.
What will Jerry do? Will Jerry Jones say, you know what, I am tired of waiting. He's been patient. He's been patient in the draft. Will he go all in? Will he extend Dak Prescott and give him a long-term deal and say, hey, I'm going for it? Because we all know Jerry Jones is walking a mile. He's not getting any longer. He's walking the green mile, and he may get desperate and say, you know what, I'm putting all my chips in the middle of the table.
Well, we've heard from his son. So Stephen Jones at the Combine said yesterday, I've got all the faith in the world we can win this thing with Dak. Other than he hadn't won some key playoff games, he's everything you want in a quarterback. From the day he walked in the door, he's won a lot of games. We just got to get over the hump. We've got to have a plan to ultimately extend Dak. And as we read that quote a little bit earlier, Tim Hasselbeck, we had a little bit of a laugh because there is an extent of it that you don't want to say other than not winning playoffs. I understand, I think, what Stephen was trying to say. Like, he's everything we want a quarterback to be, even though he hasn't accomplished this. But the part that is missing is the part that makes a lot of people question what the Cowboys' future should be. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, sure. I mean, but listen, you could say the same thing about Justin Herbert. Like, does anyone think Justin Herbert should sign a long-term deal? We probably all think he should. But look, they haven't had postseason success. I think if you try to narrow it down to that, you can get yourself into trouble at the quarterback position. What are you doing if you don't extend Dak Prescott? Who's your option? Dak Prescott, when he's under center for the Dallas Cowboys, over the last 2 years, they basically average over 30 points per game. That's really good. Look, I understand this last year wasn't great for him in terms of protecting the football, but in 2021, he threw 37 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. For perspective, Patrick Mahomes, who I'll grant you, he's not Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes that same year threw 37 and 13. So like this idea that you can't win with Dak, I'm not buying it. You most certainly can. You actually have a great leader in your building for your organization, for your team. He's not even 30 years old yet. Right. I think it's a no-brainer to extend him.
Yeah, let me agree with Tim on this. I think he's making a point. Well, I don't know if he even meant it this way.
Did you say 2021?
If you compare him to Derek Carr, there's no one is going to sit here and say Derek Carr is definitively better than Dak Prescott, and yet Derek Carr is going on a free agent tour, and the whole league is killing itself to try and sign him. So that is an indication of how Dak Prescott's future would look if the Cowboys didn't extend him.
Well, that's a great point, but you can also look at Derek Carr and see the reason why he is a free agent, because the organization realized that they had reached the ceiling with Derek Carr as their quarterback, and they have to try another way. We watched it happen in Los Angeles with Jared Goff. You have to ask yourself, what's the ceiling with Dak Prescott? Because if I give him an extension, I give him $50+ million because he took the short-term deal because he bet on himself, but he hasn't, that didn't equate to winning. So now what happens when you give him $55 million? It already cost you Amari Cooper. So you're telling me you can't surround him with talented players. You can't go out and get what this team needs because he's going to eat so much of the salary cap up. So you have to ask yourself, am I willing to give Dak Prescott $55 million? And also, what does that do to my other pending free agents, not in the short term, but in the long term, as I can't get other great weapons around him?
It's a good point. Jeff Darlington, go ahead.
Look, I think that if you are going to move on from Dak Prescott, you've got to take a very long, hard look in the mirror at your organization and at your decisions. It feels to me like Stephen Jones, based on his words, while word choice, could be a little bit better, as we've pointed out, but he's looking at this saying, clearly, our problem is not Dak Prescott, at least in his opinion. Our problem is whether it's the pieces around him. The reason why we need to extend him is to free up some of that money to be able to make those moves, to make him a better quarterback. But ultimately, I think that the Cowboys are doing that. They're going through that exercise and recognizing, look, we don't want to the Raiders don't even have a plan at quarterback. Last week, Dave Ziegler was saying basically, we don't know what our next move is going to be at quarterback. Like, maybe they figure it out, but Derek Carr might have been the better option, just as Dak Prescott remains the better option in Dallas.
Yeah, their choice. Go ahead, Tim, final word, go.
I've maintained this. It's a lot easier to get worse than better at quarterback if your starting point is Derek Carr. That's going to happen with the Raiders. Look, they could find themselves wasting really good players that are on their roster right now because they draft a quarterback inside the top 10. Like, I'm not sure that that's the right move for trying to win a championship. And I would just say this, like, if your starting point is Dak Prescott, man, is it easier to get worse than better at the quarterback position if you're going to move on from him.
Why are you making a circle?
Because ultimately you're on the wheel, right? And yeah, it's good that you always win games, but ultimately the goal is to win a Super Bowl. So ultimately sometimes you got to push your chips in and say, we got to go all in, because I don't know what's the ceiling with Dak Prescott.
I'm up against the bottom of an hour, but I love this conversation because I see both sides of it and I understand it. And I think this is sort of a good illustration of a tough decision that has to get made, and maybe made quite soon in Dallas. Meanwhile, thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.